Hey guys, welcome to Music Blueprint. My name is Gina Fontanella, and I'm so excited for you guys to be here because we have a special guest, somebody that is very, very close to me and that I have worked with. We're getting pretty close to the 5-year mark.
Almost
Really close.
there.
Yeah, we're almost there, and it's Alex Forehand. So, yay, Alex. And Alex is kind of been my marketing guru, but also my booking agent, my day-to-day manager. He has kind of worn all the hats, to say the least. So Alex, why don't you just intro yourself and talk a little bit about, where you're from, how you got started, and the whole shebang.
Yeah, absolutely. So I grew up a little north of Seattle. Gina and I actually first met when we were doing a college program over in Nashville called the Contemporary Music Center. Uh,
Lol.
so we,
Lol, we
yeah,
could only go into that
yeah,
story.
yeah, we're just gonna go surface level on that one and just move
Yeah,
on past.
so
um,
true.
but so we met there right after the program. Gina went back to Tulsa and then moved to LA, but I stayed in Nashville. I worked as an assistant tour manager, did some artist management stuff, a couple of artist management internships as well. Gina moved back to Nashville kind of right at the time I was going to LA, took an internship out there while I was finishing up college. But she just kind of happened to be coming back to LA for a show. And so we met up. And then, yeah, 5 years later, here we are. We've done a lot of booking stuff, a lot
Yes.
of marketing stuff, a lot of management stuff, and just kind of been cruising.
All of the things,
All
all of the
of the
things.
things.
Yeah.
All of the things.
Uh, yeah, and I'll probably expand on that a little more too. Alex was, just to toot Alex horn a little bit. Alex was the only person that contacted me saying that they wanted to help and wanted to get involved and get more experience and actually like followed through with that. I had so many people that were seeing what I was doing and booking my own shows and seeing that I was like putting a whole tour on basically myself,
Yep.
and people were like, oh yeah, I'd love to help and I'd love to do this and I'd love to, do whatever I can. And then when they started getting into it and realizing how much work it was, they were like, I can't do this. And so Alex was the only person that I can't really say to this day, but literally for the last like 5 years, really,
Right.
only really the last year have I had some different opportunities come up where people have been more consistent. But Alex, for the last 4 out of 5 years, has been the only person to really buckle down and be like, okay, cool, come hell or high water, I'm gonna figure this out. Because I mean, maybe we should just start there and just talk about how you started in booking and the difficulty that just the learning curve
Yeah,
it was to just
absolutely.
learn how to do that.
Booking it's a unique one. The very first show that I ever booked for Gina was this little, tiny little like dive bar in Philadelphia. And it was great. I was so stoked. I was like, hey, I just booked you this. I was like, I
Yeah,
can't
I
tell you
was
when
stoked.
it's gonna show up, but
I had never played in Pennsylvania. It was
right.
Pennsylvania, right? I had
Yeah, it
never
was in
played in
Philly.
Pennsylvania. I was so pumped. I was
Yep.
like, oh cool, we booked a show.
Yep.
Like, and basically what we had arranged too was that I basically told him, look, I'm gonna bring you on, but I've had too many people like bail on me, so I'm gonna keep doing what I'm doing, but along the way, I'll teach you like what
Yep.
I'm doing. Basically, in essence, like train you to be me
Yep.
in a simple way. And so, anyways, Alex was like working on it, and he was like, man, I just can't seem to get any gigs. Like, what's going on? So we were like tweaking things along the way, and finally he gets this gig, and it was in Pennsylvania, and man, this show is so funny. Okay, so my grandparents live in Jersey, so it's only a 2-hour drive. So they were like, we want to go to your show. We've never seen you play before. Like, we're so excited. We want to go to your show. And so I said, okay, yeah, we'll just like do a little day trip to Pennsylvania. I'll do all the driving, whatever. My grandparents are like in their 80s, okay? And we get to this show, and I'm thinking, oh, it's just gonna be like a normal music venue. It's a complete dive bar. Which I don't mind playing dive bars, but usually with dive bars, there's no seating. You're
Yep.
standing the whole time. Like there's interesting people that are walking in, and so I had to like rustle up in the back. I don't even think I was allowed to go back there, but I was like, screw y'all. I'm finding a table and chair for my grandparents, and I find this gummed up table and chair for them to sit on for like 2 hours until I played my set. And I just remember being on stage and looking out to the audience, and there's all these like tatted vegans pierced up vegans, and then my grandparents like right in the center. Oh man, it was a funny picture. But
Yep.
anyways, yeah, some of the woes of
Yep.
booking.
And that's,
You
you know,
never
that's where it
know.
started. And it's one of those
And
things, like booking is really such an interesting process because it really is
yes,
kind of a continuous growth. You know, it's like you never, as soon as you feel like you've kind of got it figured out, you've started moving on to bigger venues and different changes come up and different issues come
yeah,
up, you know, and it's really just, it's a fun process to figure out, especially when you're able to do it with someone consistently,
yeah.
you know, and so it's definitely been a fun learning curve and a fun experience. But yeah, definitely still,
What do you think, like, the time wise that it took you before you got into like the swing of things? Like, when was the time that like, and on, different levels. Obviously, there's a,
yeah.
like you said, there's different learning curves for different levels. When you start booking medium
Hmm.
venues, that's a different learning curve because you're talking
Yeah,
to now more professional people, right? In the
totally.
beginning, in the early stages, you're more trying to be the homie that they want to grab like a beer with.
Right.
But in the medium stages, they don't care if they can grab a beer with you. They just want the money. They want the
Right.
dollar point.
Yeah.
So explain a little bit about, when was the time in the early stage that you felt like, okay, now I'm getting the hang of this, and as it progressed.
Yeah, you know, I would say honestly, probably the first year was pretty much like a big learning curve. And it's kind of two-sided. You know, on one side, I was still figuring out your flow as well, but then on the booking side, when you go into a show, you know, obviously you're going to go and you're going to do your thing, and they're going to have an opinion of that, but then they're also going to have an opinion of the booking process. And if I was super disorganized, or if I wasn't good at getting them the materials that they needed, that was going to be a reflection of you as well.
Mm,
You know, so my goal was to always be as consistent as possible with them. Pretty much as soon as Gina would leave a show, I would always try and send a follow-up email within a couple of hours of that and just say,
yeah.
hey, you know, like Gina had a great time, thank you so much for having us. But my goal was to always put, as like you know, team Gina, put our best foot forward as well,
Yeah.
because you were doing the same when you would go perform.
Yeah, exactly. And I definitely can say you were so good at that every time after a show, if we liked the venue,
Yeah.
if we wanted to play there
Right.
again, we even if we didn't want to play there again, just
Right.
maintaining relationships because you never know where people will go and where people will end up.
Totally.
And you were very good about sending an email afterwards, and just saying, hey, thank you so much for letting Gina play and stuff, which I think is a lost trade sometimes, because a lot of times, I remember when we were doing the room 5. God, I can't remember the girl that used to book us. She's not there anymore. I mean, the room 5's closed now, but that was a
Yeah,
cool venue.
totally.
And she really took a chance on me because I didn't have a huge draw in LA.
Hmm.
And we always sent a follow-up email, and she always just commented about how nobody really does that anymore, and it was really nice of us to do that.
Well, and that's one of the things too about booking is, in music in general, can sometimes feel like a little bit of like a thankless career, but the
Yeah.
booking people are going through that same thing as well. You know, like they're booking
Yes.
people all the time, they're going through shows, like they also kind of want to be like, hey, you know, this person was grateful, this person was excited, and I feel like that just kind of translates into a better and stronger relationship with those venues and the booking agents.
Yeah, exactly. And I think a key point that you mentioned too is like, we were working as a team. It was a two-person team.
Totally.
So we both really had to be lined up because like just as much as you on the digital side were making sure that, everything, all the ducks were in a row to say,
Right.
me every time I showed up to a show, for me, like I didn't really drink. So like every time I had drink tickets, I would just go to the booker and be like, hey, do you want a drink?
Right.
And they don't really, sometimes they get drink tickets and sometimes they don't. And then they would be like, oh yeah, I'd love a drink. And then like, cool,
Yeah.
I didn't have to spend any money.
Yep.
I used the drink ticket that I wasn't really going to use anyways. And even if I did want to use it, probably would be better off performance wise if I didn't,
Right.
right?
Right.
And then just like it was a simple gesture and something very simple for them to remember me by and be like, oh, this girl's like really nice and talented, and like we would love to just somehow help develop her if we can, and if
Totally.
it makes sense. So it definitely is a team effort. So what about, okay, so let's move on to like the medium level, like okay, booking wise, now we got kind of got the lower level of things. Now we
Mhm.
moved into the medium level. I feel like for me, I feel like I'm still figuring that out. Like
Yeah.
I
Totally.
still don't understand sometimes. I'm like, okay, I have the draw.
Right.
Why am I not getting an email back?
Hmm.
Or like even presenting sometimes, some people you can pay to be on their tour. It's like, okay,
Yep.
I have the money.
Totally.
Why is it so difficult to get connected?
Totally. And I think the biggest thing with that is booking really is just basically you have to just be hitting the ground, and that's kind of the biggest thing is you have to be pounding the pavement pretty much every day, because you think like, you know, you're like, yes, you have the following, you have the money, but then think on the reverse side, those artists, those venues who also are getting emails from, XYZ, who are
Yes.
also, in the same situation. And so it's really, they're getting flooded with emails and connections. So also it's just consistency and communication on our end, um,
Yeah.
to say like, hey, how are we going to get in here? We went through that process for a while getting into Hotel Cafe. And
Yes.
it just, they get so flooded with emails. But then once you played, everything was great, like
Yeah.
you've been
It's
able to
still
go back.
difficult.
It is
It's
difficult.
screw them.
Totally.
It's still difficult. I'm like, bro, I've played here like 4 or 5 times in both state on both stages, okay? The big stage and
Right.
the small stage. And I'm like, why is it so difficult for me to get a contact from you guys? You know what I mean? It's like
Right.
I feel like most of the time when I book there, it's because I booked it through like another friend of mine, you
Right.
know? I'm
Right.
like, whatever, I got the job
Yeah.
done.
Yeah. Right. And
The booking game is just it's a beast and it can be very discouraging.
totally.
Very, very discouraging.
I always kind of tell people when I talk about booking that like I had never been prepared to take so many no's in closed doors before I started doing booking.
Yeah.
Because really, it's just like you send out 100 emails, you're gonna, if you get like a chunk of those back, you get a response.
Right.
Like you're like, hey,
I
yeah,
said
like
if you get a third, you're
right, I'm
like,
winning the game.
wow,
You know,
wildin'.
right. So when I first started, I just never really been in a position like that before. Like I'd worked in tour management, but mostly on the side where shows were already booked. So it's just kind of like a different communication spectrum and a different ball game. But then when I started in booking, I was like, all right, I sent out 10 emails. Like I'm probably about to get 9 back for sure.
Right.
you know,
Yeah, no.
but
Oh,
that was
yeah.
a nice little rude awakening for me, just into how difficult and how complex the process really is, and how many moving pieces are going into that. Like you're trying to book a tour, and so there's limited scope for days where you can be in certain cities. I've booked Gina on shows where she's making like 20-hour car drives just to get to the next city.
Right.
Um, I was like, hey,
Right. Well, we
you
never
gotta
played
hit
there
the road.
before, so we gotta do it.
Yeah, it's like, sorry, I already booked. It's already confirmed, so you gotta hit the road.
I remember sometimes though that wasn't always your fault. It was like sometimes I was lagging because like either I was in Tulsa and I was spending time with Ben and I was like, oh, let me just wait and wait and wait, and
Right.
then next thing you know I'm driving 25 hours straight to Tahoe and I'm seeing things in the road and I'm
Yep.
swerving. I'm like, I will never do this again.
Yep.
Yeah, it's definitely you as a booking person you at least I feel like you have to have a very thick skin and be
Totally.
very um ready to hear more no's and yeses and ready to for people just not even to contact you back. Like to me, I'd rather get an email that said, hey, no, it's just not working out this time than
Right.
nothing.
Right.
Like that was the issue for me with Hotel Cafe. It's like we would
Right.
email them and we were just like, okay, let's email them again and again,
Right.
and then we just wouldn't even get a response. And then you're like, okay, is something wrong with my email? Because then you start thinking
Right.
it must be me, right?
Right.
Like maybe
Yep.
my email wasn't set up in a way
Yeah.
that is good,
Something's
or
going on.
whatever.
Yeah.
It's
Right.
just such a difficult game.
Totally.
So
And
okay, so you kind of brought up too like your experience with tour managing, which is this is one of the things that I one of the great reasons why I think you should come on here and talk is because you kind of have dabbled in a bunch of things.
right.
We've obviously already talked about booking, and that has so many more levels to unfold. So
Right.
hopefully you'll want to come back on here. I know you like hate doing interviews, but anyways, hopefully we'll come back on here and we'll just take days to just talk about individual things that you've done. But
Totally.
yeah, talk a little bit about tour managing. How did you get into that? What was your way that you kind of like finagled into that? For a lot of people, they think like, oh, do I have to have an education? Do I have to? You actually got your way into that. Like you weren't even done with school yet. You didn't even have your bachelor's. So,
Yeah.
talk a little bit about that. How you kind of worked your way into it.
Yeah. So when I moved to Nashville, I did the CMC, which is a music program out there, which is It's kind of a hard thing to explain, but it's basically the way I always tell people is like a domestic study abroad program, pretty much. Like
Yeah.
went to Nashville for a semester. It's all music intensive. So I did that, and then afterwards, I was like, I don't feel like I'm getting as much out of school right now as I could be getting if I were to just stay here and kind of pound the pavement. So when we were at CMC, we did on the business side of it, we did presentations, and so a guy named Doug Lafrac came in and watched our presentations, and then afterwards he was kind of like, hey, like if you want to come intern for me, I was impressed with you. So I jumped on that. I moved back to Nashville pretty much with no job, found a job at Starbucks, was working there, shared a 400 square foot studio, and took this artist management internship. And then ended up getting connected to another artist management company called the Brown Book Agency, with Kat Davis, who manages Matt Maher and Meredith Andrews. And so did a lot of work with them. And then a couple months into that, Kat was like, hey, Matt's going to go on tour. Like, how would you feel about going out as an assistant tour manager and merch manager? So took that, and then it just kind of happened. Natalie Ferwerda ended up getting the gig as his tour manager. So I got to go out with her. Keith and Stribling was out on the road with us, which was awesome. And being able to learn from, not only Kat and Natalie, but Matt and everyone on the road was such a great experience for me. So I lived on the bus for a majority of a year, traveled around, and, I loved it. It was a really good gig.
What were like for me on tour, right? There's always the hiccups
Yep.
that you're just never prepared for. What
Yep.
was being on a tour like that, where you have a tour bus, you're with a bunch of different people, you're
Yeah.
all locked on one island, if you
Yep.
will. What were the hiccups that like happened that you guys were like, oh my God, we were not prepared for this and we had to figure it out?
Yeah, it's interesting on tour because pretty much you go and you show up to a venue, and this as well, obviously, but like you go and you kind of are like, okay, I have what I brought and I have what the venue might have, but otherwise, you're kind of out of luck. If you forget something, if you lose something, maybe you have a runner who can go get you something. Maybe the venue has something, kind of dependent on the situation. But I think that it really just taught me a lot in being prepared as well. I think when you're out on the road, being over prepared is so much better than being underprepared, and obviously you have to be smart about it.
Always.
Right. But you have limited
Always.
space, like we have on
Right.
the bus, we had our trailer, which is pretty much gear. And then we had our bays on
Right.
the bus. And it's like our first tour when we went out, we had literally the back lounge on the bus was full of merch, and one night
Oh wow.
we had not even enough bunks. So I slept in the back lounge with the merch, like feet up on the wall. I had a couch that was like half my height.
Right.
And we just
I
know
feel like
we're gonna make it work.
I just recently watched this episode of Friends where they let Ross move into their house with their apartment with them, and of course
Yeah.
Ross is like so anal and over the top. Like he kept being like,
Right.
guys, you're a little too loud. Just bring it down
Right.
a bit. And they're like, oh my God, I'm about to punch you in the face. But one of the things that he does is he brings all of his crap to their
Right.
apartment, right? So it's all in boxes. And Chandler walks in
Right.
and Joey pops up in the middle of these boxes and he's like, did you make a fort? And he goes, no. Yeah, I did. Like that's what I feel like
Yep.
that bus scenario is. It's like he's got all these boxes. I'm like, are you gonna make a fort? Yeah,
Yep.
I am.
And I felt so bad for Matt because that was kind of his area. Like, after a show, he would go back there and kind of like decompress. And then I was like, hey, sorry, like I literally just filled your area with, like 97 boxes worth of merch.
Right. And my suitcase
Right.
and
Yep.
everything else. That
Um,
is hilarious.
but so it's just a good, it's one of those things where you really just have to be also really good at being on the fly. We had a show one time where we were driving, from, I can't remember where we started, but we were driving all the way up to North Dakota. And like halfway through, we had an issue with our bus. And so I woke up and it was maybe, I don't know, like 7:30 in the morning. And I'd look at my phone for where we're at. And I was like, oh, we're probably almost there. And I was like, we're in the middle of Nebraska. It's like, what's going on? Like we're supposed to be here in like an hour.
Oh
And so I went up,
God.
we had a bus issue. Bus wasn't going to make it to North Dakota. So Natalie, was working with this car dealership or car rental place, which there had just been a hailstorm. So there was like 3 cars available. So Natalie, Matt, and like 3 of the band people jumped in this SUV. They drove straight to North Dakota. Like they literally pulled up at the venue and then pretty much just had to go on stage. And then Natalie was like, I got to go. So I need you to figure out like what to do with the bus and how to get the trailer somewhere. So we ended up working with Kat, who knew someone there, who connected us to someone in Nebraska, who literally drove his truck, pitched our trailer to his truck, but his kids that day had a half day, so they had to come. So we had this guy driving his truck. His 2 kids were in the front, and then 5 like grown men in the back. We had to all squeeze in there. So we put 4 of them on the seat. And at one point, I literally just laid on the bed of the truck, like underneath everyone's feet. And that's how I rode for like,
Wow.
multiple
Oh
multiple
my
hours to get there.
gosh.
So we would kind of like
That
rotate. Yep.
is so funny. Oh my gosh.
It's,
Yeah,
it's just one of those things.
that's what people don't really understand about buses too. People always want to be like, oh, we're gonna get a bus and we're gonna go
Right.
on tour and it's gonna be great. And like what people don't realize about buses is 9 times out of 10 they break down. And they're
Right.
almost like if you can avoid using a bus, it's unless you're like, freaking Katy Perry and
Right.
can like do a 20
Right.
bus tour, like, okay, great. But like for the most part, if you're a growing artist, an independent artist or whatever, don't get caught up in the glam of the bus. It's almost better to just get a van, deck out a van. Or for me, like I was like a one woman show. So I got a family size Prius, the Prius V, and it fit more than my Jeep did, which was crazy.
I know.
And I just got the mileage that was great, and it was super spacious. That freaking thing has 9 cup holders. I'm like, why do I need 9 cup holders for just
Right.
myself? But literally anybody that rode in the car with me, all my gear fit in the like trunk because it was a hatchback. And then
Right.
everybody had their space. Like literally my 6'4" uncle could stretch his feet out
Yep.
all the way in the back seat. It's like
Totally.
it was just a great car. But a lot of people just get caught up in the glam of having a bus, and because it is cool. It is cool
Right.
to be like, oh, I'm on a bunk and I got all my buddies here and we're writing music on the bus. Like it is cool, but like
Totally.
also financially and budget wise, it's not always the best, because if your bus breaks down, then who's gonna fix it? And it's
Right.
never the bus driver. For some reason, the bus driver is not a mechanic,
Right.
which I don't know why. I'd be like, that would be the contingency for me if you were my bus
Right.
driver. You have to know how to fix this bus
Right.
at the
It's
same
hard.
time.
You drive long distances, it's like the guy who would drive, or I mean we'd switch it up depending on what leg of tour we were on, but like we would get somewhere in the morning, he would get taken to the hotel, he would sleep during the day, we'd get picked up after the show, we'd usually go to a hotel where we could like shower, kind of get ready, and then we'd jump on the bus at midnight 1, we'd hang out, he'd start driving, and then he would get us there in the morning.
Right.
So
it's a crazy schedule.
Yeah.
And you literally have to, I mean, sometimes I think it's unnerving a little bit to let like my life is in your hands and you're
Right.
driving through the middle of the night.
Right.
I hope you got enough sleep today.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know what I'm saying? Like things like
Totally.
that can just be, oh man. So
Right.
okay, so now you're on this tour, right? And you're like, what was your specific job and the thing that you had to do? Obviously you've already mentioned you had to deal with merch, but what
Mhm.
more specifically, like like Natalie, because you and I both know Natalie, she like loves the spreadsheets, she loves the Excel sheets, which is what keeps you really organized on tour. I
Totally.
mean, I would tally how many CDs that I sold that night, and then later that night after the show I would go to my Excel sheet and I would say, okay, I sold 15 CDs, I made X amount in tips, and that's just for basic tax purposes. But for you,
Right.
you're doing it on behalf of the artist.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think like one thing, just to give a little shout out to Natalie, is being able to kind of learn under her was like honestly probably the best thing that could have
She's the
happened
best.
for me. Like she just is the best. She's so organized. She's so good at whatever she does. And so when I
And she
went
makes
over,
it fun on top of
she
it
does.
too. She doesn't like,
Absolutely.
she's not annoying about it,
No,
which
she's
a lot of people can be
the
annoying about
best.
it.
She's another person that you should get on here to talk.
I should,
She'd love
yeah.
to.
Yeah, now that I'm thinking about it, I should, especially since she just
Yeah.
went on John Mayer's tour. Like
Yeah.
she would have tons of knowledge to
And
talk about.
she's just like good at any part of the business side of the industry.
Yeah.
She like when I still have questions about things, I just like I'm gonna give Natalie a call, you know.
And a little background on Natalie too. I know you guys are like, who the frick is Natalie? Natalie is the program that we did, the Contemporary Music Center, like Alex said, was basically an all-encompassing program about you have a semester long and you just do music the whole semester. And the point of the semester is that they're teaching you how to put on a tour. So at the end of the semester, we put on a 10-day tour all on our own. I mean, talking about like we built the stage with like truss and like lights and all these things. The business section, which was the part that Alex was a part of, they put on the whole tour. They got the dates, the venues, the everything. I mean, they put the whole thing together. And Natalie was ahead of the business department in our program. And so, and she was always the person that everybody loved. Like you wanted Natalie to like you. It didn't matter where you were. You wanted her to like you. She's funny. She's great to be around. She also lays down the hammer when she needs to lay down the hammer.
She does.
But she's just awesome. And she's done since the CMC a lot of just awesome things. And she tour manages and wanted to take tour managing, I believe, to the next level. And so she kind of took almost a step down, but not really. She like took a step down to be an assistant to a tour manager, but it was on John Mayer's tour. So I'm like, that's not really a step down.
Yeah. She went out on the road for a bit with Sam Hunt, you know, doing different stuff. Like she just kills it. And, you know, that's kind of I think like one of the best things that I've learned from Natalie. I mean, there's a long list of things I've learned from Natalie, but one of the best is like, I don't think Natalie has ever left a venue, a meeting, anything where someone hasn't been like, I want to work with her again. And that's kind of been my biggest takeaway is I'm like, you know, things go wrong on tour in any aspect of the music industry, you know, when you're in charge, things go wrong, but still to be able to be like, hey, we're going to fix it. And we're going to leave this with still a solid relationship intact. I think that's one of the best things that I've learned just from watching her work.
Yeah. And cause 9 times out of 10, honestly, it's not, everybody knows, I would say most people, most just normal, nice people know that something's going to go wrong.
Right.
We're not in an industry that is everything goes right. And so everybody knows that something's going to go wrong. So it's not really about the fact that something went wrong. It's really about how you handle it. And it's really like, you know, if something went wrong, did you throw a hissy fit on stage and get pissed off and start cursing out the sound person? Or, you know, your manager is now talking to the manager of the venue and cursing them out. Like that will never get you back to play there ever again. But if something goes wrong and you're like, hey man, is there something that we can do to help, you know, make this run more efficiently, you know, on your side, you know, what are you needing? And it's just about how you handle it, because almost every show, or at least like 1 every 3 shows, something went wrong. And it could be like the same gear, same person, same venue. Like in Tahoe, I've played shows there and it was like 5 nights in a row, and literally it was like every 3 nights something was going wrong with the sound, and I'm like, how? It's the same setup.
No, and it's just one of those things that like being on the road is just going into it knowing that like you're in basically every night you're in a unique situation, you know what I mean? Like even if you're playing the same place, things are still different, you know, like sound can change dependent on how many people are in there, you know, just so many different things can change. So it's so hard to be like, I'm going to go into this solidified, like I'm going to prepare ahead of time, everything, get everything in line, but you're just going to new places, you're working with new people, you know, you're working with different size venues who have different sound expectations and sound setups, you know. So it's really just being flexible on your end, and also making sure that you're taking the steps that you can take to make sure that you're putting on a good show as well.
Right. Exactly. Now, did you have to do like any marketing while you were on the road? Like what was because now, you know, you're kind of stepping into the last few years, I would say you're more in a marketing role now. Like now you've done those things, but you're doing more of the visual aspect of everything, I guess, for every business. So did you have to do that while you were on the road there, or you were like, actually, no, I did none of that, and I just happened to just fall into marketing?
Honestly, not really a ton. When I was working with the Brown Book Agency, who's Matt's management company, right before I went out on the road, Kat had me helped with some like coordination type stuff of the marketing side, and especially visual print and audio assets. But I didn't necessarily like contribute a ton to that. It was more just kind of like making sure the right people had the right things. And then when I went back to school, and I was at the label, I did tour marketing, and worked some in there. And then when I finished my degree, I started working with the company that I'm at now, which is actually a non music related company, but that's kind of where I feel like I developed the majority of my kind of like my marketing background.
Right. Yeah, and then and like what did you like about it? What like brought you into it? Did you just fall into it? Did you just like, oh, started working for, Windermere, and
Yeah.
then you're like, I actually kind of like this.
Yeah. I
You know what I
mean,
mean?
honestly, I kind of did just fall into it a little bit. Like that job had gotten posted. I'd actually applied for a different position within Windermere at the time, and they were like, "Hey, you have like a decent amount of marketing experience." And it wasn't even laid out as like I was, like my position was XYZ marketing, but just in like my skill sets and thing that I've done in the past, they were like, "Hey, would you be interested in this?" And so I ended up just kind of falling into it. Like I didn't even know that it was a position there until I had already applied. And then
Gotcha.
it's just been kind of one of those things that I've continued to develop. Went back to grad school to get my master's in strategic
Mhm.
communication, which also has a focus on graphic design and digital.
Mhm.
So kind of continued developing there.
Mm.
But marketing, similar to music, is just one of those things that you can never stop learning in. It's constantly
Right.
changing, it's constantly evolving. And so I think those are kind of the two things that I would look for in a position is I
Yeah.
want to continue to be challenged, continue to be able to kind of grow and develop my skill set in in a certain industry or in a certain realm of work.
Yeah, and I feel the same. I think that that's one of the main reasons why I didn't go to something that was math oriented, because I
Totally.
was like, okay, all the formulas, there's not going to be a different formula. It's the same tried and
Right.
true stuff, Pythagorean, like
Right.
Pythagoras, like all these things, like that's going to be the same. Like
Right.
I feel like I'm probably going to get bored in this. Although math,
Right.
can if you go into like space engineering and stuff, that
Totally.
gets crazy. But I just, when I was trying to decide what I wanted to do with my life, which again, I was one of those weird kids that was thinking about it way too early. But when I was thinking about it, I was like, what do I want to do and why do I want to do it? And
Mhm.
one of the things that actually really enticed me to music was I was like, I will never be bored with this.
Totally.
There is so many, even just like on a pure career aspect, like, let's just say I didn't want to be an artist anymore, just
Right.
even moving to music business side or
Totally.
marketing side. I
Yep.
mean, you're just
You know?
constantly being challenged all the time, and there's always somebody that comes out and flips the whole script. Like,
Mhm.
Old Town Road, Lil Nas,
Yep.
he came in and flipped the whole script on everything. They were like, wait,
Yep.
hold on, we have a country rap song, which I know, like, we have country rap, but like he was
Right.
actually like, he took hip hop
Yeah.
and rap and
Yep.
put it together and then marketed it on TikTok.
Yep. You
It was
know?
like,
Just like those are
hold
things that are
on.
never, or it's when Beyonce just like dropped Lemonade, like no one had
Oh, right. Well,
dropped some,
Beyonce.
right. I mean, she's obviously had she can do whatever
No,
she
but like I mean,
wants.
Beyonce's like classic for that. She'll
I
just
know.
drop an album and not tell anybody about it.
Right.
And I'm like, this
But then people like
girl.
started doing that, She was like, oh,
Yeah.
she was kind of like the first one though who did that on like a big scale.
Yeah.
And now it used to be like if you were even gonna put out a single, you would promo it, but now it's like, oh, like you are still gonna promote and you're gonna put out stuff, but it's not in the same scope that it used to be. Like you
Right.
could sometimes announce a single on like a Monday, Tuesday, and then you're putting it out on Thursday.
Yeah.
And I think that's also just stems from social media as well, and things move so quick. Like you could
Mhm.
announce something XYZ weeks before, but is it going to stay in people's mind? It's like those quick
Right.
little like tidbits of information that people can grab and hold on to.
Yeah.
And so it's just one of those things that like entertainment, media, music in general, the landscape will never stop changing.
Yeah. It's always different. I mean, even again, like I just thought of another great example. It's like the fact that people don't really do albums anymore.
Totally.
But you know what's about to happen is albums are going to come back,
Right.
because we've been in this phase of singles for like 10 years,
Yep.
and now more artists are starting to release
Mm.
albums again that are thematically like where they need to be, you know what I mean, and that's
Right.
going to become back a thing.
Yep.
So it's just never ending, and you like you've said multiple times in this interview, you have to be on your toes, you have to be ready to change and ready to learn about something new. I mean, TikTok came out, and
Right.
my boyfriend was like, oh, you should get on TikTok, it's really cool, and I was on Musically, but it just wasn't user friendly, and I
Mhm.
should have stuck with it, honestly. Again, hindsight is 2020.
Right.
But he put me onto TikTok, and TikTok wasn't big yet. And so then it was like, okay, cool, let me just do some stuff on TikTok, and he was already going viral with like a bunch of his videos. So he kept like poking fun at me. It was kind of like a
Right.
friendly rivalry kind of thing. Like, you don't even have one that's gone viral yet,
Right.
right? And then in the auditions during American Idol, you know, you're with all these crazy singers, and I did this video of Sing This, and my boy Tito Ray sang the crap.
Yeah.
He can sing some runs crazy. And the video got over 1 million views, and it was like, boom, 20,000. Then I had another video go viral, boom, 40,000. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
So again, if I would have just been like, no, I'm going to stick with Instagram, even though Instagram, everything in Instagram is set the way that it's set, and it's really hard to break into it. But if I just would have stuck to my guns and not been willing to change or learn or anything, then I would have never had TikTok, and I would have never gained the followers that I gained.
Totally.
So you really got to be on your toes with stuff, and really just, again, go with the market and be
Right.
ahead of it, not
Totally.
behind it.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Like, don't be on the wave of TikTok when everybody's on it. Be on the wave of something before it happens. You know what I
Right.
mean?
Yep. And I mean, you look at that too, like on one, there's like the like profile part of it where, you know, you want your videos to go viral, but then you look at things like TikTok where like sound bits and songs are also blowing up on there as well, you know? So it's like,
Right.
okay, you want your profile and you want your following to increase, but it's also like that's not really something that you would necessarily see on Instagram or on Facebook. And so that was kind of
Mhm.
another thing where it came up, and it's like social media is changing. It's like
Yeah.
if you looked at, you know, the top 10 songs on Billboard right now, multiple of them are basically blown up because of TikTok.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, yeah, it's just really crazy when you think. I think what happens to most people is they think that it'll be lost time.
Yeah.
You know, like there's a lot of things that I've done that's new apps and new platforms, and you know, you're like, well, I'm doing this, and even if they're paying you to do it, like there's been
Right.
companies that have paid me to do their apps and stuff, and I'm slowly building a following, and then the app, they decide they run out of money, and then they're like, we can't do this anymore, and I'm like, well, crap, I was already building a following
Right.
on that, right? But I think what you have to understand is, especially when you're young,
Hmm.
that's the one thing you do have to give is time, and you do have the time to like go down the rabbit hole of something, and maybe you only build 20,000 followers, but right before that happens, you say, look, everybody go to my Instagram, or everybody go to my YouTube or whatever and follow me.
Hmm.
um and then you're still building a follower, like a following that way. You're transferring over, collectively building from things and taking from things, and also getting the knowledge and experience of how people work, because at the end of the day, music is about connecting with people, and you somehow have to use social media to do that and figure that out, especially in today's world. And having more knowledge in your arsenal about how people tick is what is going to make you successful. Emotional intelligence is always the winning game here.
Yep. Well, and too, it's, you know, when you try out some of those apps like that and you are developing a following, you do get time to connect with people a little bit more individually because
Right.
your fan base is still developing, you know? So, yeah, maybe you try something and it doesn't necessarily work out, but
Mm.
you built even just a handful of fans who are now feeling like they're very engaged in you, you know?
Yeah.
Obviously, having a big following is everyone wants that. That's the goal, you know?
Right.
Uh, but having that opportunity as well to kind of really connect with people is what
Mm.
also gives you the chance to really build some long-term fan engagement.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so let's get, we went on a rabbit trail, but let's get back to marketing.
Okay.
And because again, you and I can talk about music and things for forever,
Yep.
just because we've known each other so long. But if you were gonna give like three main things to focus on marketing, either on like a visual aspect, maybe that's, you know, you tend to like more of the visual aspect of things, of, you know, maybe somebody's creating a post and it's like, how are, where should the word be, or where, you know,
Yeah.
like the coloring, or the, like, should people be focusing on a color scheme on their Instagram, because there's a lot of people that do that, or, you know, is it just like a free for all and just get the content out? Like, what do you think, what are like the three things that you could give people to walk away with that they should focus on?
Yeah, you know, I think one thing just in general, I think consistency of posts is a big thing. Being able to um, consistently kind of say like, hey, you know, like, and Gina's done a great job of this, where in the past we've done things like Music Monday or What Do You Want to Hear Wednesday, or she did karaoke and is doing
Mm.
karaoke, but just something where you kind of start to give people an expectation of when that's going to happen and when they can be ready to kind
Yeah.
of be involved in that. But, at first it might start out smaller, but then people start to be like, oh, it's 4 o'clock. Like, I'm more familiar that now Gina's going to be live. Like, I'm going to jump in on this.
Right.
So being able to
And
be consistent.
yeah, and also on a side note of that, I'll double down on that as well. Like social media and their algorithms
Mhm.
work to give you a boost because of that.
Yep.
People that are consistently going on, even when you go to check your social media, if you're consistently going on to check and like post at the same time, they give you a boost in that. And I think honestly, the greatest example of that for me would actually be with YouTube, which
Mhm.
they have the strongest algorithm when it comes to consistency. I mean, you could literally post actual garbage on there, but if it was every day, every Monday at 12, you would somehow magically get 5,000 followers. Like it's crazy. And I've seen that. Like I did American Idol, and then I started consistently putting out videos. I think it was every Tuesday and Friday. And
Mhm.
yeah, right now I'm smaller, so the exposure is like I'm in a smaller pool. But as you get bigger, the pool gets a lot bigger as well. So, and I gained 1,000 plus followers, in honestly like two months.
Yeah.
So again, you can really start compounding on things. Sorry, go keep
No,
going.
you're good. Yeah. I think the next two kind of go hand in hand, but they're a little bit contradictory. I think
Mhm.
on one hand, it's really good to be consistent with a branding perspective, whether that be colors, fonts, um, anything in that range, like having a branding identity where if people start to see you posting something, they can recognize it being like, oh, that's Gina. Like
Yeah.
they don't necessarily need to see your face as the first thing to be like, oh, I know who's going to post this.
Right.
But then kind of on the opposite flip side of that coin is to also not be afraid to take chances with things that you're marketing with and push bounds and kind of try things that are new. So I
Mhm.
think it's important to have on those posts or on whatever it may be, if it's album artwork, if it's poster design, anything on the marketing side, to have your branding kind of locked in, but also be willing to try new things. If you have like specific fonts and specific colors, you can really kind of play with the design side and still have that tied back to
Right.
your artistry. And I
Yeah.
think that's a really important thing to be pushing.
Yeah, and I totally agree. It's kind of hard to also you kind of have to go with like what's best for you in a
Totally.
sense. Like you got to be true to who you are. If you're not the person that like I don't know, cares about coloring and all these things, and that's not who you are, and you don't want to take the time to do that, okay, fine, then don't take the time to do that. But then you have to find something else that is very you.
Yeah.
Like for instance, I'll use Lauren Spencer Smith. Like when you look at her page, there's not a specific coloring going on there, but you know that she constantly posts like videos of herself singing. So
Yep.
her like page is flooded with her singing a bunch of songs. And you know that she does cover songs, right? So and for me, like actually one of the things that I've started doing on TikTok, because I didn't want to get caught up in being the cover singer, because especially at the place I am in my career, I can't really recover from that if people end up seeing me as that person. I don't have enough time to transition out of that.
Totally.
So what I've decided to do is I've decided to be the like original music chick, where everything that I post on my page is original music.
That's
Unless I'm doing something humorously. Like the other day I did one with like D's nuts and I was like dying. I was laughing
great.
so hard. But
Right.
for the most part, like people know that if I'm going to post a video of me singing, 9 times out of 10, it's going to have this is a gray wall right now, but I have lights that shine up, and it's going to have some purple pinkish lights in
Yep.
the background. And I'm going to be singing a song that I wrote recently. And I'm going to be like, what do you guys think of this?
Totally.
And so people know from that that's going to be me. And they know that I'm like sticking to my guns about original music.
Yep.
And then also for me, I'm a very like colorful, like I have the streak, so that plays a big part in my marketing, because every picture that I take has this in it with different colors.
Yep.
So everybody knows when they see basically a girl, literally they could just see this part of
Right.
this and they'd be like, that's Gina.
Here she
That's
is.
right. Like people, I will literally get recognized multiple times. I haven't seen somebody in like 10 years, like from high school, and I'll just be walking around LA and somebody will be like, Gina, and then I'll turn and look and they're like, I knew it was you. I saw the streak.
Right.
So you want that like factor of like you can get recognized not only on your social media profiles but also in your like daily life. You know, you
Totally.
want your whole imagery to kind of be through and through, and whatever that is whatever that is.
Totally.
But you got to find a way that it's just consistent. Consistency is the key.
Mhm.
Don't like, and again, if you're younger, try new things out, try different things or whatever.
Totally.
But as you figure it out, be very consistent on what you're doing and what you're presenting.
And it's, it's interesting too for musicians because it's like you can talk branding for a company, you can talk branding in a lot of different realms, but branding for an artist is literally you kind of are your brand, so
Yeah.
it's just like a different ballpark than a lot of traditional branding methods, where you could have great branding for your company, but as soon as you walk out of the office, you're kind of, hands are clean, going to do your thing. But when you're an artist, really at the end of the day, you are your brand, and you are the thing that people are relating to. So
Yeah.
having things that you've developed, you've built out, um, I think is one of the best ways for longevity.
Yeah, and people know when you're being fake too. Don't underestimate that. People know when you're just trying to be, a cute boy that like can sing decent and like is always trying to be sexy and biting his lip. Like people know when you're being true to who you are, and you might get buzzed for a little bit, but at some point it'll stop and just level out. And then what are you going to do? So,
Yeah,
trying to be true to who you are is really, really and truly the way to be the most successful. And if you can do that, because you're in a business where people tend to be very insecure about who they are and they try to put a mask on. And when somebody comes in and is just unapologetically themselves, it does rub some people wrong, but it's usually the insecure people. The people that are the higher ups are exactly like that. They're like, this is who I am. And like,
right,
like me, I don't walk into a hip hop session and be like, oh yeah, I can write hip hop songs. No,
right.
because that's not who I am. I walk into a hip hop session, I'm like, look, I write pop songs, but I could throw some lyrics up in here that'll be
Right.
fire for a hip hop song. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Like I'm unapologetically who I am. And again, the people that it rubs wrong are the people that you don't really want to be around anyways. You don't want those kind of people in your life anyways. You're trying to get to the upper echelon of people, and when you do get to that upper echelon of people, they're the people that are like, don't BS me, don't like play
Yep.
games with me, lay it out straight. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So again, the more that you can just be truly who you are, the better. And you'll just be so much more successful about that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, Alex, thank you so much for, even though, look, I knew you would come on here anyways.
No, right. I don't really have a choice.
Right. Your birthday's coming up too, so
I
you want a
know.
gift or not?
Right.
But no, thank you for coming on here. You have just been an awesome person in my life, and I literally would not have known. I honestly would not be where I am today without you. You have put so much time into my career and never really asked for anything, and I'm just so, so thankful for you. So thank you for coming on here and being a part of this. I really, really appreciate it. And please let the people know if you want them to follow you or even contact you. Maybe they have some marketing stuff. Give them an email. I can put it in the description below on how to contact him. But go ahead, do your
Yeah,
pitch as well.
totally. Absolutely. Always happy to, give advice, work on marketing projects. So you can always just email over to booking@ginofontanella.com. And that's me.
That's you. All
That's
right.
the one.
Bye, guys.
Awesome.
Try to take these skills and use them this week. See you later.